Rabea Ataya is the founder and CEO of Bayt.com, the Middle East's leading job site, which now serves over 26 million professionals and 40,000 employers from its 12 regional offices. He also co-founded GoNabit, the region's first group purchasing site, InfoFort, the Middle East's first and leading records management company, and he serves on the board of several Middle Eastern startups. He also serves on the board of Queen Rania Foundation, which is focused on empowering youth through education in our region. He's a graduate of Stanford University with a BS in Electrical Engineering and an MS in Engineering Economic Systems. Welcome, Rabea. Good to see you. Thank you for welcoming us here. Going back to your childhood, is there a moment that you can think of that inspired you, a moment that defined you?
I was very lucky to be inspired throughout my childhood. So I grew up in Kuwait. Kuwait was a very comfortable, safe, easy place to grow up. And I grew up, my parents are of Palestinian origin. And that was always a very inspirational community because here was a community of people who were refugees, who had come into this country pretty much at its founding and were part of the social fabric and helped build it. And all of them had just the most amazing stories. People who had to leave their homes at age 8, 9, 10, and then go off in the world without really anything to their name, and were able in many cases to build wonderful businesses, educational institutions, and generally the community was great at giving back. So every day was a day of inspiration, and there are countless stories I can share with you of just amazing people who really beat the odds and built wonderful things for themselves and their families.
And I feel that sometimes we are a little bit spoiled because we have so much around us, and when we immerse ourselves in our parents' and our grandparents' story, that is when the real inspiration comes through. What did your grandfather go through when he was a refugee? He had a family, and how did he move forward from there?
So they went from essentially having a lot to having nothing, to everyone being cooped up as refugees in a single room and with no jobs, no sources of income. All of their assets were left behind. And what I realize is just amazingly wonderful about that generation is, by all accounts, he just got on with it. So I can imagine it's so easy to become depressed, to give up, to really question the meaning of life in situations like that. But he was a man built of stronger stuff.
So both your grandfather and your father basically were entrepreneurial because, as you've mentioned, a village in South Lebanon is full of entrepreneurs. There are farmers, there are craftsmen, there
fishermen, whatever they are, you generally work for yourself.
Absolutely. So there's no God-given right to get a job. And and today's generation is looking for jobs.
Sure.
And you have created the #1 job site. So do you think that jobs is an inherent human right and that governments need to deliver jobs to you?
That's a great question. We all need to find ways where we can create value. I think for us, even those who choose to not be the #1 person in an organization, within any organization, what's expected of any person at a job today is to be entrepreneurial in mindset. There are very few jobs today that are about just do this task. Today's jobs tend to be a lot more about, in a fast-changing world, is here's the task that we know we need to get done, but there are probably 100 ways that it should change and evolve, and can you help us change and evolve this? And if you don't exhibit that entrepreneurial spirit within your job, you probably won't hold that job for very long in today's world. So I think more and more every job is entrepreneurial. And I think just like we went from a world of primarily small businesses and high entrepreneurship to a very corporate, structured world of large businesses, I almost see the pendulum swinging back, and more people all around the world are becoming contractors, freelancers, or when they do take on a full-time job, they really have a contractor freelancer mindset about it. had 6 almost back-to-back interviews, and within 2 weeks of that, got rejection letters from each of them. And this was a...
Well done.
Yeah, this was a massive shock to me. And again, when you talk about humbling experiences, because I thought, hey, I've got great grades, I've gone to a great university, I had never really been rejected at anything before, so even my application to universities I got in. What am I missing here? What's wrong? It's far more difficult to find your passion than it is to avoid the things you dislike.
The mission of Bayt.
We wanted to build a Middle Eastern institution that was globally recognized, admired, and respected. And so the Middle Eastern wasn't that we'd only want to serve this region, but we wanted people to understand that we came from this region and that we truly built something that was reflective of what we could be proud of in the region. The mission is, how do we get to building such a great company? And that was about empowering people with tools and information to build their lifestyle of choice. And what that means in very simple terms is we realize the people we admire and respect are the people who've helped us lead better lives. And so we wanted to build a company that helped people lead better lives. And the first problem that we could help solve was perhaps the most important problem that we felt existed in the region, which was this problem of high youth unemployment that was growing very quickly.
Let's change gears and get into the more aggressive area of entrepreneurship and startups and VCs and this whole community that we have here. As we were discussing, 100 million people need jobs in this region. You're a #1 job site, so you're serving them in one way. But by your own admission, the solution is actually entrepreneurship and starting your own businesses. Why aren't you in that business?
Yeah.
Or are you in that business?
I fundamentally believe that if we're going to dig ourselves out of the mess that we're in the region, it's very important that we make it far easier for entrepreneurs to become entrepreneurs. And that doesn't mean by far easier. There are always obstacles to entrepreneurship, but the obstacles in the region should not be so much higher than they are anywhere else in the world. We should at least have a competitive playing field in terms of letting people who want to start their businesses start their businesses. So one thing is just talking about it all the time to anyone who listened to me. Bayt has over the years been the foundation, I think, of many other successful stories that have actually sprung out of it. So we at some point launched a group buying site out of Bayt called Go Nabbit, which became one of the first e-commerce exits in the region. At Bayt, Mom's World was incubated for a year, and now Mom's World is viewed as a successful e-commerce business that's growing very rapidly and has gotten quite a bit of investor interest. I myself have invested in well over a dozen different internet businesses across the region. We currently incubate a few other internet businesses that aren't Bayt. And so I'm in this world, I enjoy this world, I enjoy the world of encouraging people to experiment with new ideas and to grow them.
Do you think the people have the same energy and drive? I mean, they may have a great idea, but do they actually have the resilience and the tenacity to execute and to take it all the way through? Because I see so many good ideas, but I just don't see resilience.
Yeah.
Do you share that? Or
I see a lot of young people, you're right, coming up with some great ideas, but oftentimes they're not necessarily prepared to build a business. They might be prepared to build a product. Building a business is a bit different than building a product. And I think that's something that people can learn. And whether they learn it on the job or whether they learn it going to an MBA somewhere, but it's something they can learn.
I dare say you are either directly or just by your influence mentoring a lot of people and inspiring a lot of people around you. And that becomes a big responsibility. How do you take that responsibility on yourself?
I think what I find has been valuable for me when people do seek my advice is to try to never share advice, but to try to share personal experiences that relate so people can take their own conclusions, because no two situations are exactly the same. And so when someone says, hey, I'm having a challenging time raising money, as opposed to saying this is what you should do, similar to your talk just now about what it took you to find a job, it's far more inspirational for you to say, listen, I knocked on 300 doors before I got one to open for me, than it is to say, go knock on 300 doors. So advice comes cheaply. People I found that interact tend to value personal experience sharing much, much more. And the nice thing about sharing your personal experience is you're not making a judgment on someone else's situation. You're just explaining your interpretation of it and how in your life it's affected you.
Any advice that you'd like to give, like to share with a young person who's looking for a job? What advice would you give to them that they can take on tomorrow morning and do it now?
This goes back to the not giving advice things, but but again, and I'll stay true, and I'll talk about my personal experience with this. One thing that helped me was taking personal responsibility. I could have easily blamed my lack of getting a job on them, but I had to. It was my life, and I was responsible for it. And so ultimately, it doesn't help anyone to blame someone else. I think every young person has to wake up every day and think, how am I going to take responsibility for my life and make it better? Two is it is the law of numbers, and you're absolutely right. So I had to apply to a dozen jobs, half a dozen jobs, and get rejected and read a whole bunch of books before I started getting accepted.
We've spoken about this side of the equation. The other side of the equation are the employers. Yeah. What sort of insights do you have in terms of what should they be looking for? What are the different kinds of skills and the softer skills that are coming in that they need to start engaging with, rather than looking at a boring CV?
It's a brilliant question. I think employers, are realizing increasingly that it's not the hard skills that they need, but it is the soft skills. And in survey after survey, when we survey these employers, what they primarily complain about is they're not able to find the soft professional skills that's required for success. I attribute that primarily to the fact that people in the Middle East, while they go to great universities and get the hard skills necessary, they're generally getting their first work experience at age 22 onwards, after they've graduated from university. So they really have no idea what it's like to actually be in a workplace, and they're entirely unprepared for it. And so employers can play a great role in encouraging people to get into the workplace early by offering internships and summer jobs in order to bring in younger people early on and get to know them. And that's highly beneficial, not just for the job seekers, but it's highly beneficial for the employers.
It's a privilege to talk about your family, about your grandfather from the year 1948 to yourself as a grandfather in 2048. And the journey of your life, of your children, of your company, and all the contributions that you're making. It's a real privilege.
Thank you. The privilege has been mine, Tariq, and I appreciate it.
It's an amazing journey that we have actually embarked on together, which is to inspire young people, to motivate employers, and to go out there and provide little insights and nuggets to people so they can take action tomorrow, and they can change their lives, and they change the lives of people around them. Thank you very much indeed it's a real privilege, and happy to be working together with you.
I
appreciate it. Thank you.